So, 10 of the weirdest things that I've seen in my books. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. And on this channel, I discuss martial arts books and other martial arts related subjects. This week I've decided to do a video on just some of the weirdness that I've found in my books over the years. You can see I got quite a bit. That doesn't even include what I have on PDF. Most of the material is pretty straightforward most of the time, but sometimes it gets into some really weird or unusual areas. So some of these are going to be just like, well, that's weird. Others are going to be like, I think that might be good technique, but nobody else has ever written on this before. So with that in mind, here are 10 of the weirdest or most unusual things that I have seen in my books. So we're going to already start with one that I'm going to have to be careful with my wording of, because I'm not monetized, so I can't be demonetized. But I also don't want to violate community guidelines, and I try to keep most of my stuff pretty PG on here. So, in the book Kung Fu, History, Philosophy, and Technique by David Chow and Richard Spengler, there's a section on these unusual Chinese martial arts skills. And frankly, I think those are taken from an older book, and if I can find it, because I think I have it on PDF, I'll go ahead and put a little note here. And of course, there are some things that seem reasonable and some things that seem questionable, but probably the most unusual thing I have on there is something called Xian Yin Gong. And the premise is, hey guys, you know how it sucks to be hit between the legs? What if you could, the thing turtles do with their heads? What if you could do that with your gonads? And it's several paragraphs on how to, force your chi and then visualize it, rising into your lower abdomen, and using this to, again, pull your boys out of danger so that you can't be kicked there. So, that's just weird. I can understand why one would want to have an ability like that. But, I had to give it a second look when I saw it in the book to make sure I was reading what I was reading. Another unusual thing that I've actually already covered in one of my book reviews, in Lauren Christensen's book, Extreme Joint Locking and Breaking, he has an entire chapter on locking the toes, as in the phalanges on the foot, and how to capture a guy's kick if he's kicking you barefoot, and then start popping his toes back and stuff like that. To his credit, this, I think, is the only resource I have that goes over multiple joint locks on the toes. So, I'm not arguing that they would work. I just, as I stated in my review, wonder under what circumstances that would be your best option. But, for academic purposes, there it is. Here's how to execute a joint lock on somebody's baby toe. Sticking with the realm of grappling for a minute, although also not really, there was a book by Eddie Bravo, founder of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. It was one of his first books out there, Mastering the Rubber Guard. And I remembered that I'd bought his previous book, and it had some very unusual transitions and submissions in it. And I was sort of interested in checking this out. it does have a very systematic approach to the rubber guard and also half guard and I think butterfly guard as well. And I think that's all fine and good. What surprised me though was in his acknowledgments section, he spends a lot of time talking about the benefits of marijuana. Which, for people who know Eddie Bravo, is not a surprise. I didn't know anything about him other than his other book. I was not expecting to find that in a book about martial arts. And that's why it's on this list, because, again, the rest of the book is just straight up no-gi submission grappling technique. Next up is from W.E. Fairbairn's seminal work, Get Tough. Now, I know a lot of people really like this book. I think about half of it is not very useful to most people, and some of it's actually pretty suspect. I think I've reviewed a book that sort of debunked his timetable of death, because he had a chart in there showing how long it would take someone to die based on knife wounds to various areas, and it was wrong. Like, very, very, very wrong. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about a technique that he refers to as the grapevine. And I do have a few books that cover how to secure a prisoner or something along those lines. What's notable about this is that I guess you have to find a tree or a post of a very specific diameter, and then you make the guy cross his legs around it, and then you push him down to the ground. This does effectively lock his legs. I understand how it works. There's a catch wrestling based submission called an Indian deathlock that is sort of used in here. The thing about this particular technique, I guess it is a technique, you're going to need probably more than one person to get somebody to do that to begin with. You're going to need, like, ideal circumstances, find something that's the right size for them to wrap their legs around in that fashion. And then, as he states, you're going to need two people to, like, pick the dude up and help untangle his legs. And it just seems overly complicated, and I'm sure the Special Forces are glad that zip ties got invented. It seems an overly complicated and very circumstantial thing to do. If the guy's wearing boots, just take his laces and tie him up. Wouldn't that work? Okay, guys, this next one's a treat. I bought the book. The book is The Ninja Training Manual, and the author is listed as Christopher Hunter. His real name is Radford Davis, better known as Ashita Kim. And there's going to be a lot of weird stuff just in his books, and maybe at some point I will do a weird Ashita Kim stuff video. This one got a good chuckle out of me even as I read it. I think some of the techniques in it, it's basic karate and judo and some sword stuff which may or may not be good. I'm not a sword expert. I don't know. But there's this mandamus, I guess, in the beginning. And I'm going to read this thing to you, and I'm going to post it up so you can see what I'm talking about. Obey this warning. This training manual of the Black Dragon Fighting Society is the personal property of, name here, of the city of, name here, state of, name here. The same being a rare and valuable volume of the ancient wisdom and celestial fire, written and arranged in the manner of self-instruction, and, in consequence of which, every person is thus warned and most earnestly cautioned never to steal the same, nor distort, nor tamper with, the teachings or formulas given therein. For if you steal this volume, or by intention cause perversion of the formulas, sacred names, and seals contained therein, You will attract an evil spirit and other powerful influences, which will most surely do you injury and cause you to regret your actions to the day of your death. Should you be so foolish or rash as to steal this sacred volume, which is the property of thy neighbor. When did we start doing, the King James Bible over here? Before you have read it and received this mandamus, return it to him at once, and no harm will befall you. But if thee dares to disobey this warning, woe be unto thee! For the great system and order of adepts and master lamas of India and China have their astral and occult guards who can witness your every action, see and know every thought that goes through your brain, and they will not hesitate, for they know too well how to avenge thefts and tamperings with their occult teachings. So beware and obey this mandamus. Otherwise, you will never know peace, fortune, or contentment afterwards. So, yeah. There was a lot of unnecessary capitalization there, too. But, I picked it up. It was relatively cheap. At no point did I believe that, but I got a good laugh out of it. It was because of how overdramatic it was. But yeah, what else would you expect from Ashita Khem? Next is sort of an interesting entry. So, Jean Labelle's Encyclopedia of Finishing Holds. There's a lot of good information in there, but also there's a lot of him just sort of, I believe the British term is taking the piss. He has a lot of fun with some of the stuff that he's doing. And some of it's sort of hard to know how much of it to take seriously. But he does have this one entry. And I was just reading along because I read everything in the book. But it's on page 456. And in this area, he's showing, I got this guy twisted up, and also I'm biting him, and, just a series of bites in this area. But it's interesting. There might be a hidden gem there when he says, always bite with your back teeth. And I had to think about that. And I sort of get it. Your back teeth, your proper molars, have two roots going into your jaw instead of one like your front teeth do. So if you bit somebody with your back teeth and they started thrashing around, I guess there's less of a possibility that your teeth could get pulled out. That means that somebody thought about what are the best teeth to bite somebody with, and then made me think about it. So I had to include that in this list. Sticking with the theme of biting, we're actually going to get into something kind of serious. I have this book called The Citizen's Guide to Stopping Suicide Attackers. It's by Itay Gill and Dan Barron. It's one of those things that I feel like I should be a little bit skeptical about. Because how would you know unless you were able to do this, and how would you be able to do this unless you actually killed someone and also had to do it repeatedly to make sure that it worked more than once, right? The chapter is on a suicide bomber and trapping their arms behind their back while you're behind them, and optimally having somebody else there to help end the threat. But if there's no one there, he actually advises to bite into the neck and chew into the guy's, he says the veins or arteries. I guess he says veins on the side of the neck. Basically, yeah, go all Dracula on this dude, and in the hope that he goes into shock and bleeds out and is therefore no longer a threat. And I'm skeptical about it because, what's the diameter of the average neck? It's not flat. It's not shaped like a sandwich. I don't I don't know if I'd be able to open my jaw wide enough to actually do that or get deep enough. I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm skeptical about it, but it definitely stood out when I read it. So there's a few other unusual things in that book that I'll get to once I get to the review. But yeah, that's one thing that's always stood out in my mind of like that is a weird thing to have in a book. All right, on to the world of classic mixed martial arts. Bas Rutten wrote two books, his Big Book of Combat, Volume 1 and 2. In Volume 1, it begins with like his training and conditioning routine. Now, specifically, he has, starting on page 32, a section on like training in the pool. And of course, it starts off with stuff that you'd expect, like, doing laps. And then it goes into partner training in a pool. He's like, you can throw somebody in a pool without the danger of them taking a hard fall. And you can practice your pummeling, and you can practice your submissions. And I understand where he's coming from. Anything done underwater is going to automatically have more resistance to it. And in fact, I have a video series by Silver Fox, whose name I can't remember right now, a jiu-jitsu guy. I'll put his name down here. Where, he does a whole technique thing, and then he'll also demonstrate, this is sort of like a yoga or body movement flow that I do in the pool, like underwater. So I understand the benefits of it. I have to say, I like to think of myself as being comfortable in my own skin and, not easily embarrassed by what other people think. I think I'd be anxious to ask someone to do this with me. I don't think I'd want to get caught doing it publicly. I'd be a little embarrassed by that. But, again, I can totally understand why it's a good idea. It's an interesting idea for partner training, and I think you could probably do like pool sparring too, like underwater throwing very slow motion punches and kicks because of the resistance of the water, although I don't think he covers it here. But yeah, that was an unusual thing. That's why it's in the list. Sticking with mixed martial arts, Mark Hatmaker wrote a book called Boxing for MMA. And I consider it a very good book overall, but the most unusual chapter, he has an entire chapter, it's a little bit brief, but it's on punching the legs. Now, the book was published in 2014, and I think for those of you who were following MMA around that time, we were seeing in some fights, guys were throwing, usually jabs, but like at the top of their opponent's thighs. So it was a thing for a time. I don't think I've seen it in a while. But because that was like the cutting edge thing, and because he was covering boxing in general, yeah, you got an entire chapter on throwing jab crosses and hooks from a distance, and then throwing hooks and hammer fists when you're in a clinch to the thigh. Again, it's unusual. I don't have any other books that talk about that. So that's why I made the list. And finally, just a little mention, in Dim Mak, Death Point Striking by the late Earl Montagu. This is a book on the use of pressure points for fighting, and Appendix B is full of the martial applications of the various points. One of the points that he refers to as colon 10, I think it corresponds to what most people would call large intestine 10, and it's on the forearm, here-ish. But in that section, he basically says, yeah, if you hit it, the person's going to crap themselves. They may experience diarrhea. He's got 3 different ways of hitting it, and like 2 of those ways will cause a release of the bowels. And I do have a few other books on pressure points. I don't think any of them mention that. Um, I've sort of like smacked it around myself to not have that effect. Who knows? I have some thoughts about pressure points in general. But again, I thought that it deserves to be on this list of unusual things because someone is telling you that you can hit somebody in the arm and it will cause them to fill their trousers. That's weird. Thank you for indulging me. I was just having a little bit of fun with this. You know, I do enjoy doing the book reviews, but I have to say that doing a review every week gets a little bit monotonous for me. So I do like to pick and choose some non-review things to talk about sometimes. So if you guys like lists like this, go ahead and let me know in the comments. If you've come across any weird or unusual things in your instructionals, in your books, please let me know. I do have a Ko-fi account. Please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. If you donate with a request for a specific book, I'll try to get to that book, assuming I have it. So, again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys later.